this, out of all this, because that's naturally what everybody knows. 10 underlines is what father and mother who would naturally sacrifice their basic interests of life for those that they guard. Yes, by all means, a mother would cut herself completely out of social life just to look after the interest of her kids. Yes, a father would cut off his interest of connecting with things that he would love and what have you in order to make sure that he looks after his household. That is what's going to be very important for us to know later on, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks of us not to have this kind of relationship with somebody else who does not share with you the same traditions and customs, because they don't know any better. They don't know why you're doing this, and they're not familiar of why you do this. So it has to be that nature of customs that you already share together as a common factor together, which is Islam. All right, so inshallah ta'ala, that's just a definition that we can, inshallah ta'ala, move on, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is something really big, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will declare war against that person. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now we want to talk about the wilaya. How can you become a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because if you are able to become a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then everything else in this hadith pertains to you. And that is really, really, really tough. Because now you are talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ranking you in such a high level that would allow you to become one of his awliya, which means everything that we're going to read in this hadith. So let's go inshallah ta'ala. Guys, if you would go down, I'm going to just scroll down with the hadith because I feel it's really, really, if you have read it or if you are to read it, I want you to focus on some certain areas. Keep going, this is just the beginning of this. So we will talk here, general. The importance of this hadith lies in its describing how one can become one of Allah's awliya. So that's the most important thing. Many important points can be derived from this hadith. It is therefore deserving of a very, very extensive commentary. By all means, this class would not give it its right because this is where scholars have put it into volumes again of how, because you're talking about something, it's like I'm giving you directions of how you would become a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means everything in hadith that Allah's shadow is going to be around you. You are just being shadowed and you're being really protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, general comments about the hadith, if we can go inshallah ta'ala down a little bit. Alright, so Imam al-Shawkani, who comments a lot, and Sheikh Jamal Zaragoza uses the comments of Imam al-Shawkani so much in his book, which is the book that has been adopted for your class. He wrote a whole book, big book, about explaining this hadith, and that's why I said this class will not give this hadith its right, but this is just to put you on track, inshallah ta'ala, to take, inshallah ta'ala, care of this hadith and study it more. So let's go down. This is again Imam Abu Huraira was mentioned in the hadith before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Almighty said, so we said that this is hadith Qudsi, so we can go down, inshallah. Now the concept of wali according to the Quran and Sunnah, here the word wali from the root wala has been used. It has been translated as friend for lack of a better term. We just can't find anything in English that would define everything a father and a mother would do toward the guardians or the people that they guard as guardians. In Allah's description of the awliya, He points out two essential or necessary characteristics for anyone to be among the awliya of Allah. The first condition is iman, faith, while the second is taqwa. So now we know that it's described in order for you to be basically under this label, faith has to be very strong and taqwa has to be very strong. Now many people, many of us have faith and have taqwa, but it's not strong enough to put us in a level where you can start even that rank of wilaya and then you will just go up. So that by itself is just the seed and the start of it, but it takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of practice of taqwa in order for you to even start on the first step of wilaya. Okay, let's go down a little bit, inshallah. Now here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, we got this, learned that from this ayah, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. This is where we got iman from. وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. This is where we got taqwa from. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines it as first. ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا فمنهم ظالم لنفسه. Now, if you go down a little bit, bring it up, inshallah. All right. So ثم أورثنا الكتاب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have entrusted my deen to those ibad. منهم ظالم لنفسه. One category didn't much care and went really transgressed against itself. وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ. And the other part, that they took care of their deen, but they just did the bare minimum. This would definitely rule you out. You cannot be a wali under this category. This would rule you out. You cannot be under wilaya with this category, where you just do the bare minimum. وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Allah allows this part to really hasten to the khayr and go up and up and up until they get to that level of wilaya, inshallah. So let's go more, inshallah, down. Keep going, inshallah. Okay. Keep going. This is all, by the way, ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains the wilaya. Allahu waliyul ladina amanu. This is, as you know, in Surah al-Baqarah, very popular. That comes right after Ayatul Kursi. So a lot of you already have it memorized. So you already have the terminology and the proof of how someone would get to this wilaya level. Okay, inshallah. So that's enough of proofs how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted and focused on this. Now, some of the incorrect concepts that are taught about wilaya and wali, that inshallah ta'ala, one I would summarize. This is a long passage. So it's about how some of the sects of some, not all, so we don't generalize and say all Sufis, but rather some of the sects of Sufis have really basically destroyed or really kind of messed up the concept of wilaya, where they have defined wilaya to be a completely different level that we don't talk about. And just to make all this short for you to summarize it, they define a wali as they have the highest level of awliya, of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They consider them to be who? Who do you think? Of all the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La. Huh? Messengers, not, you're getting close, but not yet. La. Like the top level. You're still thinking within human beings. They're not human beings. Angels. So they rank angels to be the top awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right after the angels, you said it, some of you said it. messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's the difference between a messenger? Okay, before I ask this question. Right after messengers, they rank prophets. What's the difference between a messenger and a prophet?
Messenger brought new message, a new religion.
Sah. A messenger would always have a message with him, and he would advocate for that message. A prophet does not necessarily have any new concept or message to carry, but rather continue what the messenger brought. That's all. So always prophets are on a lower level than messengers. So they consider angels, messengers, and prophets. They rank a wali to be between a messenger and a prophet. So a wali in this sect is really higher than prophets. And that's why this concept of wali, some people get extremely irritated when they say this is a wali from awliya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because their mind is of what unfortunately this sect has really defined a wali to be. So they made it almost impossible for anyone to strive hard to get to that level, because they said, well, that's who's going to be above a prophet. Yeah, and most of us will just give up too soon. I'm not going to be in that level at all. And honestly, life proved that there is no such thing, because at the end we're human beings and we tend to do mistakes, and that's the awful thing. When you rank someone so high, any mistake that they do, it's not only that it turns people off, but it really drags a lot of other people out of Islam. They said if this wali did this. That's why you have this very, very offensive attitude when it comes in Christianity to the priests and those who are on a high level, and they are ranked religiously within their hierarchy of to be on that level. So any mistake that they do, it just turns people off and drags people and just allows people to take it as an excuse to get out of their deen completely, because they are having such a high rank to that person, and when he does or she does something, below average, natural, normal, they will be criticized for it. And by all means, yes, because this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not define. They defined it themselves and they put themselves in deep trouble. Okay, let's go down. All this would summarize all this passage that you would read about the definition of wali according to some of the Sufis sects. Keep going, inshallah. So now, inshallah, keep going. Okay, let's see what's here. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I declare war upon him. So this is the result of opposing the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply because they are obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once again, this expression is in, well, here because Prophet said, Man adali. So this is that those who actually would declare war against my awliya, and those that are in a level where they have the taqwa and iman, got on a high level where they are really great role model in society, and people would go against them, whether they're messengers, whether they are prophets, whether we as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, after messengers, after prophets, who do we rank to be of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The Sahaba, yes, the companions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and those who came after them. Because Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly said that the best of three generations is my generation, and the one after, and the one after. Yani Sahaba, Tabi'een, Tabi'at Tabi'een. Those are ranked by Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be among the awliya. After this, may Allah help us. Allah understand. Okay, however, so we can, inshallah, go down more. So let's see what Imam Shawkani, I'm sorry, just 1 second, let me see if I didn't miss anything. Imam Shawkani adds that although a human is an insignificant creature man should not dare go to war against Allah. His own soul can deceive himself and think that he is capable of such a war. Therefore, he goes ahead and opposes Allah's awliya, although he knows that such is hated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Go inshallah ta'ala up. So let's go to, let's see what we keep going. This is just an ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala proves how he really declares and he protects his awliya. Okay, now that's what I know. Okay, again, this is very important. Now that we defined, now we got to know the higher really rank of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves his awliya, those who have sacrificed themselves to be among the three generations and the scholars that really dedicated their life for this deen. And you would think, why would someone, honestly, from among Muslims themselves, why would someone ever think of going against such a high rank that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognized? Why would you think so? Why would I ever go against a companion, against a big scholar, against a role model that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that label to? What would come to your mind? What goes through our mind as humans to do so? Na'am? Arrogance. Yes, okay. If you can say it clearly, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Yes, say it again.
So in knowledge, you think he's more knowledgeable, respected.
So a person would think that he's more knowledgeable. So it's the competition among the scholars themselves. Okay? What else?
Wali's behavior is not in tune with Allah's declared words, Allah's words. The Wali,
That's no. I'm talking about if the wali is a role model. Why would someone else? Why would someone else actually go against the wali of Allah?
if someone else perceives that the Wali is not,
I see. So maybe they perceives their perception is that he's not really acting accordingly. Yes. A kafir and a munafiq would not like to see this position does exist in society. Okay. Jealousy, yes, that could be very well. Yes.
So if they're telling you to do something right, but your desires tell you to do something else, then you, say bad things about them to make them look wrong in the eyes of people, so that you can get away with that.
Okay. Okay. So this is just in our terminology. I have a different agenda and I want to push that agenda. So in order for me to push my thoughts, my point of view, my intellectual perception of something, I have to put down the other opinions and the other positions that other carries strongly. Okay, excellent. So that did, just to share with you on a personal basis, one actually of the closest example that I can bring you is the narrator of this hadith. We said who narrated this hadith? You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Who made takhrij to this hadith? Yani, who actually collected this hadith in his collection? Al-Imam al-Bukhari. You know what happened to Imam al-Bukhari is actually when he came to his village, when he was recognized to be like out of the ordinary, his people welcomed him in such a great welcome because they were so proud to be among their people and what have you. To a point that, all the scholars in his town, by consensus, they have welcomed him, not only welcomed him, but opened all the masajid for him that he can walk in every masjid. He can give any khutbah or any lesson and what have you. Not only that, they have pushed all their students to actually have the ultimate flexibility to attend their classes or attend Imam al-Bukhari's classes. This is how it started. As subhanallah, things progressed And naturally, Imam al-Bukhari has attracted almost everybody in town with the way he connected with people, with the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him to be among the awliya. Remember, the hadith would say that that's how naturally you start loving people. And you love him for no reason except Allah put the love in your heart toward that person. Now it started okay. It started that I'm getting less and less students in my class. They're going to Imam al-Bukhari. It's okay, for the good and for the better. It ended up being that I come to Saturday morning class and no one is here. And everybody's in Imam al-Bukhari's class. And that's where the human beings, that is the big test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you. Now, I am really, really, really competing with you to a point that you're almost becoming no one in society. Despite the fact that Imam Bukhari never ever spoke a word against them or saying, oh yeah, they don't know anything, here I am, if you need the real knowledge, come here, nothing. Because these are his own teachers. And despite that, subhanallah, they all decided to drive him out of the town. And that's what happened to Imam Bukhari. Toward the end of his life, he was actually, after all this great welcome, he was kicked out of his hometown. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests people, the scholars, how they were tested, and also how Imam Bukhari was tested. Because Imam Bukhari was tested as well. So as he was kicked out, he did not declare, a protest. He said, okay, we're meeting downtown to the city hall, and we're standing, and I'm going against the shura, I'm against my masjid, I don't care. They don't know what they're doing. None of that. None of that. He actually ended up telling all his followers that actually ended up following him to the other place that he went to, that this is the norm of a human being. That's natural, and jealousy is there. We should work harder on ourselves to suppress it and what have you. But alhamdulillah, they're still your scholars and they're your sheikhs, and you take knowledge from them. And wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends me, wherever I land, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I do blossom and I do give khair to others. That's the wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No matter of ups and downs in life, he was tested when he was taught. And he didn't take any arrogance with it. Never looked down on his teachers and said they don't know any better. When he was actually, after all this fame, kicked out with nothing, no position, nothing. He didn't take anything with him. That did not allow him to go against the people that actually made him something. Because he always understood that this is how Allah tests people, and some people don't succeed in the test very well. So now, saying all this, here are the ayat that you want to learn and you want to make note of, because these are the ayat that the Islamophobes and those who try to mess up our minds would use. They tell you that your Quran is teaching you to hate others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير. So bring this up a little bit so someone can read that for us in English. Alright, a volunteer to read English, inshallah. So I can take a break. Yes?
Let not the believers take the disbelievers for their friends and preference to the believers. Whoever does so has no connection with law, unless he indeed fear danger from them. The only one to concern himself, to Allah the final return.
Excellent. So this is what I want you to make note of. First of all, you are being attacked by saying your God is telling you, whoever does not carry your way of life is considered to be outcasted, is a disbeliever, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, never become a friend of them. So, which means if you're not a friend, the opposite, you're enemy of those disbelievers. In general, it doesn't matter. They don't really specify who are the disbelievers and what kind of status are they holding against you or what have you. This is what clearly says. As long as you're not a Muslim, don't take them friends. And if you actually do show that you want to take them friends, your God is telling you, unless you indeed fear a danger from them. So your God is telling you to act what? To? Man, I don't know why you whisper. I don't have that, mashallah. If you have an answer, please say it out loud. Just don't whisper because I'm going to have to repeat it 3 times. I can't hear you. Just say it. It's okay. Even if you make a mistake, that's part of seeking knowledge. You win some and you lose some. It's okay.
So does that mean, like, according to this, the translation of the ayah, that means, like, as in entering treaties, making pacts, like,
So,
is that what it's referring to?
well, I don't want to discuss now what we actually believe. I want you to tell me when they read it, the non-Muslims,
Oh, okay. So
what do they tell you about your God, about Allah? It's telling you to do.
It's basically, according to the translation, it's making it sound like we can't have friends who are non-Muslims.
And if
if we do, then Allah is basically against us.
So when are you allowed to actually take them as friends?
Out of fear.
Out of fear.
From their actions.
And that explains to you what Fox News always says.
Right.
Don't ever trust your neighbors.
Right.
They act nice. They seem nice.
But they're
He's
different.
the most loving, quiet person. But that's what their God telling them. It's out of fear. Their hidden selves. Their sleeping selves. And when the order comes from al-Baghdadi, from ISIS, they will act. That's why you see all this nonsense. This last second, they called him and they said, okay, we pledge allegiance for you, and we are going to make something, all this nonsense. But unfortunately, this is how it gets extracted. And no one takes, a second to actually go to our actual classical references to really see what it did really actually say. When did it come? Are we talking about warfare? What kind of fear are we talking about? And what is the tuqah here? Which actually they know this terminology very well, and they say that they practice what is called tuqya. What is tuqya? Yes.
When you tell someone something, but internally you don't mean it.
Excellent. Tuqya is actually more of like the classical hypocrisy. You say something, you act something, but you hide something else.
Dirty business.
Yeah, well, everybody wants different. All right, so let's go to another one. بشر المنافقين okay بأن لهم عذابا أليما الذين يتخذون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين أيبتغون عندهم العزة فإن العزة لله جميعا. Somebody to translate. I should bring it up a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep bothering you. So the reason why, because people in the back cannot see the bottom, so just bring it up all the way so that they can see it. Yalla, bismillah. Volunteers. Wake up.
Bear unto the hypocrites the tidings that to them there is a painful doom. Those who choose disbelievers for their friends instead of believers. They look for power at their hands, lo, all power appertains to Allah.
Excellent. So that's another verse that they use against you. And you now, as a Muslim, your biggest problem that they are actually translating this to be what? Friends, right? And your definition of awliya is what? What we just discussed before. Just the father and the mother figure. And here it's being translated as friends, which is very poor translation, but unfortunately they can't find a word that would actually, unless they write a paragraph of what wali means, which I believe they should, because that's giving us the most difficult time to keep, being apologetic that this is not what it means and what have you. طيب. Now, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا عدوي وعدوكم أولياء تلقون إليهم بالمودة. Remember when I told you in previous classes that this is how you translate the Quran. This is how the scholars of tafsir translate. Now we had 4 ayat. And as it was said, how do you translate this? You read other ayat and say, here's one of the ayat that actually gives you more depth of the previous ayat. So I want you to read it and you tell me, you as a mufassir, how would you bring this and embed it into the translation of what a wali means and what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually means? So let's read the translation. Kashif, bring it up. Thank you. Yes. Easy. Just 1.5 line. Volunteers.
O you who believe, do not take my enemy and your enemy as a friend, showing affection toward them.
Excellent. Take 10 seconds for you to become your own mufassir now. And I want you to really make tafsir of the previous ayat of what wilaya means here and what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mean when He says don't take them as a wali. I'm not going to use a friend, but rather a wali.
Go back to the hadith. Also, if someone obsessed with religious word, I believe one of my awliyat and I wait for him. Therefore, I'm assuming that it means if he doesn't want Prophet Muhammad of believers to take awliyat from people who are waging war against him, meaning they're trying to kill him at the moment or they're out to get him. I'm not asking if there's no, neutrality or, kind of.
Okay, so now reading more verses said by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is defining now more in depth what He means by disbelievers. So what do you define more as disbelievers in the previous ayat? What kind of disbelievers are we talking about? One that are considered to be enemy. One that show no mercy with the Muslims in general. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we have other ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not bother with the disbelievers who do not bother with you. And they actually have treaty with you and you don't come close to them and you actually protect them when they are under your protection and what have you. We have other ayat that actually explains the overall theme, and that's why when we say, when they get out of context, they just take one ayah and they say, that's what your Quran says. Your Quran says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا, oh who you believe, لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء, don't take them friends, because they are friends with each other alone. They don't like anybody else, they hate everybody else, which is not true, but this is how they translate it. وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ, this يَتَوَلَّهُمْ is the same with wilaya. أولياء, wali, يتولى, it's all the same. وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ, those of you that actually takes al-Yahud and Nasara, awliya, that's their consequences. They say that your God is saying, فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ, then he doesn't become Muslim anymore. They said this is how they intimidate their members, and they tell them, if you actually become a friend of any Jew or any Christian, therefore you are a disbeliever. You're not among them anymore. And unfortunately, that's the agenda of what the so-claimed radical extremist Muslims around the globe using actually to push this utter nonsense meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has never meant, but to say that even if a Muslim would just take a fraction of a friendship of any Jew or any, even if it's as simple as living in their land, even if it's as simple as doing any simple transaction with them. Because if you do a simple transaction with them, you trust them. If you trust them, then you take them as a friend, then you are not from among them, then you are kafir, then I have the full right to slaughter you. And that's why they are basically ruthless. They have no mercy none whatsoever. Because they consider everyone to be disbeliever. And you do not deserve to live because you just went against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you declared war against Allah. So you are enemy of Allah, then you need to die. Okay, let's go inshallah ta'ala finish more of these ayat that they are always taking against us. More? Okay, let's see what's here. Here, the Imam is bringing one of the verses that actually talks about the definition of Khalil. And here again, the Khalil is being translated that I had never taken such a one for friend. This is Khalil, which is another one. That's the high level of friendship, but it's not as high as wilaya or wali. And still it's being translated as a friend because they just can't find English word that would define what a wali is and what a khalil is and what a sahib is and what a sadiq is and what such and such and such and all these levels of different levels of friendship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can have a friend, but you have a limitation where you can open up to that person because of the limitation of culture. Sometimes it's a higher level because of the limitation of customs, then a higher level because of the limitation of the faith that you carry, and so on and so forth. Okay, inshallah, let's keep going. Let's see what we can see. This is more verses that would define for you exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means by do not take them as awliya, not friends, as the relationship that you have as a dad and as a mom, which I said underline 10 times, that you would actually sacrifice your life for them and you would never betray them. And that's what goes under wilaya. Whereas some, unfortunately, would be so close of a friend relationship and awliya to a point that they would drop protection, they would drop compromise, they would drop sacrifice, they would drop betrayal. You know, one of the, again, just to get you out of the intensity and of just going through all this, you know, everyone here is familiar with the name Al-Hajjaj, right or not, or wrong? When we say Al-Hajjaj, what comes to your mind first? Hajjaj Shia? No, Hajjaj. Huh? Yeah, killing people. Killing, not people, killing who? Muslims, right? Ruthless, no mercy, just my way or the highway, as I said. No room for second opinion and what have you. That's what comes to our mind. Just to give you a very simple definition, despite his ruthlessness, his way of life, he never ever dropped the definition of actually wilaya, but unfortunately he was so much wali to the Umayyin, to to his khilafah, but rather went against everybody that would actually compromise their rulership for the Umayyads. So he actually went very, very aggressive against the Muslims, but never ever in his history you would read that he ever shook hands with the enemy of Islam against even the normal basics of any individual and citizens of the Muslim Ummah. Never. So yes, he was ruthless with the Muslims, but as well with the enemies of Islam that actually wanted to destroy the dynasty of Islam. But rather, this is his way of life. Not to justify it, none whatsoever, but just to tell you that he knew also how to define. So he knew that these things don't get dropped. I'm not really a great wali to my own people, but I'm not compromising my deen to serve and to push the agenda of those who are awaiting any opening, any gap in the Muslim Ummah that I can infiltrate and hit hard and dismantle. He didn't allow that, and many didn't allow that, which kept that description for him that actually, despite his ruthlessness, despite his tough position, he never took advantage of that position to sign hidden treaties or agreements with enemies of Islam to push his agenda and to protect the Umayyads. But rather he did it within the Muslim fold. He didn't put any compromise with others. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing more and more that as a Muslim, you cannot compromise your deen and betray your people in order to push your agenda. You cannot, and Sheikh Jamal Zaragoza brought an interesting example. Kashif, can you go a little bit down? بس شوي just see easy. Just scroll like easy. Keep going. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is defining here who is the wali for you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because Allah is the protector, Allah is the merciful, Allah the one that loves you, that protects you, that guards you, that sacrifice whatever it takes to protect you, would give you all these countless ni'am and bounties without expecting to receive anything back from you. Same with His messenger. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say وَالَّذِينَ أَسْلَمُوا, because this takes a higher level. الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. Those the higher level of believers. Okay, let's keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Until he gives the example of the Andalus, how the wilaya is really. Keep going. Let's see what's here. Okay, so anyway, maybe we skipped it, but he brings an example of during the time of Andalus, where actually this wilaya definition showed very, very, very obvious, where the Muslim leaders and rulers started actually shaking hands with the absolute clear enemy of Islam against their own brothers, in order to take the rulership, in order to establish and strengthen their rulership. And they put hands with it, and they allowed the enemy to actually hit and kill Muslims in order to protect their agenda and what have you. And the unfortunate fact at the end, after they were used, like what happens nowadays, and until the day of judgment, no changes would happen. After they used them, and they abused them, what do they do with them? Do they send them to heaven? They send them to the trash can. And they just basically execute them, assassinate them, and get rid of them. Because now they got to know way, way too much that we cannot, compromise our stability, so they have to go. After many years, of betrayals and serving them and becoming their slaves and going against their own people, against their own deen, just for them to stay for extra lifetime of 5 years, 10 years, Allahu A'lam. At the end, it doesn't matter who that person is. They're going to be put into that hole, into that grave, and they're going to face the consequences, unfortunately taking nothing with them that would protect them. طيب.
Couldn't find where we were before.
Sure. I got confused. Let's stop here. The importance of, okay, and now we're going to go into, so wilaya took a lot of time, but I think that was very necessary because it's something that you're going to be facing every time. طيب. Now the importance of volunteer deeds here, the hadith says that if you take that level of wilaya, but before the volunteer deeds, actually there is the top, which is the mandatory one. So the importance of obligatory deeds. So what I want you to get out of all this hadith is what's defining for you. We said in order for you to just put your footstep on the door of entering to become considered to be a wali is to have iman and taqwa. And then you need to work on this. Now, in order for you to enhance that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you the very first important thing that I want you to perfect or to work hard to perfect or to make it very close to perfection is the obligatory one. And I can't really stress this enough, to be honest with you. We got it really messed up nowadays, is that we tend to really focus sometimes on the voluntarily ones and not focus much on. Allah is giving us a very clear message. If you would to just focus on your salah, yani give me the attention that you could in salah. Don't start the salah and start daydreaming. And then you think of the 12 rak'ahs of sunan, and then the night prayer, and I'm coming to Taraweeh. That's why you see we are messed up even during the Ramadan season. We tend to relax at futur time, and we eat all our food, then we follow it with sweets, then we follow it with tea and coffee, then we follow it with more sweets, then we follow it with more coffee and tea, and then we look at the clock and we say, Allah, it's due now, the parking issues and what have you. So let me wait until it clears. And what I will do, I will go to the masjid and then join the Taraweeh, but with the intention of Isha. Is this permissible? Yes or no, and don't get scared. Just say yes or no. I see on your faces. Is that a trick question? Yes or no? Yes, it's permissible. Is it the right thing to do? Why? If it's permissible.
The intention is not right.
The intention is not right.
Your counsel. Like you're taking your own ease, you're preferring your ease first rather
Right.
than
And you're missing out
missing
on.
out the hope.
But I'm doing jama'ah when I'm coming later on. I have jama'ah of like 1,000 people.
That
Aywa,
means
Iqamat Salah, part of Iqamat Salah is what? Establishing prayer is to do what? What? To pray on time, exactly. And that is the obligatory deed is the Iqamah is at 9:30 or 9:45. That's part of establishing the prayer that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. So yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to push yourself. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to miss out on the second set of sweets that you love. And sipping the coffee, in like a passionate way, and I want to take my time. I want that couch. I don't want to rush things and what have you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you actually to give up on that and to push yourself, and yes, to go through struggle and to fight with the security guards. And, they tell you, no, you can't park here. I see a parking there. Now that's for the imam. No, the imam is not here, and I want that parking, and all that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would see what's inside. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see how you push yourself, and then it falls back that that's what Allah loves. Allah doesn't want you to go to the voluntarily one first. He wants you to take care of the obligatory one if you want wilayat label. And you take this example and you apply it in everything. Everything, my dear brothers and sisters. Give me an example of another misuse of mixing between obligatory and voluntary. Anything comes to your mind?
You give to the needy but not give the cup.
Excellent. You give to the needy. You're a guy that donates whenever Brother Muhammad makes fundraising. Bismillah. I get really hyped up. And then you have no idea what's your zakat due, and you just say, well, I gave donation. La, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to actually calculate and make sure that it goes to the right. What else comes to your mind?
Doing umrah.
Excellent. People who are just obsessed with Umrah. Umrah, 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 Umrah. What about Hajj? I'm not ready yet. Umrah, Umrah, Allahu Akbar. What do you mean you're not ready yet? You are going there. I'm not ready for Hajj because, Hajj is Hajj. So what does that mean? Like, Hajj means like total transformation. I want to go to Hajj when I am ready to become a wali. So I will go to Hajj, come back, no sinful acts, nothing, everything is, and that might never happen. And we might die before that actually happens, and this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, nope, it doesn't matter. Even if you do a countless amount of Umrah, and you missed out on your Hajj, nope, the door is closed for you. You're not going to be labeled as wali. And many examples that we can bring to justify that this is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that's what I want you to take care of. That's what I want you to focus on. When you actually come to prayer, I rather for you to focus on Salatul Isha, 10 minutes. If we push it, 15 minutes. I'd rather for you to focus on those 15 minutes rather than staying up all night long praying 2 sets of rak'ahs, 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 until you get to Fajr prayer. Amazing. I'm standing up for 6 hours. You're telling me this 15 minutes, if we push it, is more important than 6 hours of worship? Yes. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that's what I love for my servant to do first. To focus on, to establish it well, and to do it well, and to work hard on perfecting that, before you end up focusing on the branches of Islam. Fix your grounds first and foundation before you think of the branches. That reflects that you should work hard on your belief, on your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, way more important to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because that's part of the shahada of La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, than you focusing on branches. Let's just memorize the hadith, let's do, the fiqh. I want to learn tajweed, I want to learn Arabic, I want to learn this, I want to learn, okay, before you learn Arabic, before you learn Quran, before you memorize Quran, before you do any of this, you need to strengthen your connection of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is first. And to establish that foundation, which reflects that when you add the voluntary to it, you do it right and you add it right, inshallah. Okay, let's go, inshallah. You can just bring it up. Go to the voluntarily one. So here, of course, just to summarize it for you, he's bringing all the ayat that establishing of salah at top. And here siyam of Allah says, if you want to perfect the obligatory one of salah, then it should reflect this result for you. If you establish it well, salah is going to do what? It's going to prevent you from the fahsha and the munkar. That's the end result. So this is where you will not have contradiction and people say, well, we praise in the first row. He does all this, and I had dealing with him. I bought a car, and he said it's working very well, and subhanallah, 200 miles after that, just breaks down. I'm sure he knew about it, and the transmission was messed up, and that such thing. and I bought a house from him, and the inspector that he recommended actually ended up being his friend, and they really let a lot of things happen, and all this mess that you hear of dealing with each other, or even with marrying each other, and I asked about him or about her, and he said like he's a Sahabi, right after Umar ibn Khattab, mashallah, attends the masjid and blah blah, and he ended up being very abusive, and he has a major, major anger problem that no one can miss it. His parents knew about it, his relatives knew about it, his friends knew about it, everyone knew about it except the people that he proposed to. They didn't know any better. They asked, no one told them, and they ended up letting their daughter with him, and he ended up abusing their own daughter and what have you. Even though they claimed to pray first rule right after the Imam. That what true salah should reflect. Honesty, truthfulness, even if it's on your behalf, even if it does not serve your interest. That's what it should result. When you do the obligatory of siyam, it increases that level of taqwa that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to push you up to become a wali of His. Then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to pay zakah in order to purify your soul up to learn how to care for others and take care of others. It's not about, oh yeah, it's just 2.5, I make sure but it's all about that this intention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making you to think of others and to take care of others and making sure that you are so delighted and you're so happy that actually your zakah came to be this time and this year about $5,000. You're not saying $5,000, that's a lot. No, you're not thinking that way. Allah blessed you to think, Alhamdulillah, that I'm paying zakah of $5,000 because that means what? You are wealthy enough to pay $5,000. And you're saying, Alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful. Inshallah, next year that I pay zakah of $10,000. Because that means that Allah is blessing you more and more rather than you saying 5,000. They say like all the charitable organizations are crooks. And they don't send the money right and the governments take half of it. I'm not paying zakah. Khalas, I just give it to people that I know and you justify things and shaitan gets into you. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is really wants you to purify your soul to purify that money. Go ahead, inshallah. Up. Alright, so now the voluntarily, mashallah, yani all of you, we know how we, alhamdulillah, get into it. As you perfect the obligatory one, then you add to it the voluntary. What I want to share with you on the voluntary one is in the bottom, actually, when we conclude this hadith. And so I can give you a quick break. I'm sorry we're pushing you toward the end to finish the curriculum. So this one, keep going, inshallah. Keep going until it has those bullets. Keep going. Now we want to talk about the rest of the hadith. The voluntarily is all known that what it perfects the mandatory one. So as we fall short in the mandatory, this just helps it. So I just want to go to the end of the hadith. It has the bullets. Yeah, right here. So now, go down a little bit. So I'm sorry, go up. More. Yes. The most obvious question that arises from these words. Now, I want you to understand the complexity of the wording that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I would become his hearing, I would become his hand, I would become his foot, I would become, this is kind of, causes a lot of uncomfort. How would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would become my hand or would become my side or would become, but of course these are like the most obvious question that arises from these words of the hadith is how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become a person's hearing, seeing, and so forth. This question has been answered in a number of ways. Ibn Hajar presents 7 different interpretations for this passage. There are yet others that Ibn Hajar did please, did not mention a little bit more obvious. These include the following, not that some of them may be overlapping. Note that some of them may be overlapping. So first he said it is kind of metaphoric, right? It's just more of, I'm telling you, what comes to your mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will become your hearing and your sight and your hands? What comes to your mind? In order to say it's metaphoric. Yes?
He guides you.
Excellent. So he guides you to see what's right, to hear only what's right, to touch and to reach out to only what's right. So you would avoid the haram and focus more on the halal. Second, the person's whole being becomes busy with what is related to Allah. Second interpretation, that it's actually that you would become transformed in a point that you feel you are really being controlled by a different entity. You have no interest in anything else except in these things that connect you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You just lose interest of the worldly temptations at all. Third interpretation. Okay, the person makes Allah his goal and purpose, and therefore it is as if Allah has become the person's hearing. So not too far from the second interpretation, that Allah becomes your purpose of life, Allah becomes your target, Allah and pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will become your ultimate goal, and that's why you feel everything that you do in life would become just to please Him. Of course, these are just his interpretation to it, and Imam Shawkani is saying that this is a little bit far-fetched, this is not too close, whatever, but there is really no absolute definition. This is just all, in my opinion, all these interpretations are correct. You put them all together, it gives you that. So Allah supports his wali in the same way that a person uses his hands and legs to fight his enemy. According to one of the Imams, there is agreement among the scholars who are respected that this hadith is more, yes. And Imam Shawkani here says that he argues that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is much greater than being compared to the weak arm. So we're not talking about physical, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala physically, controls your hand and controls your sight, but again, it's more of that guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. The fifth one, Allah protects the person's hearing to the point that he only hears what is good and pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, it's all overlapping and coming with the thing. A sixth meaning is a little more detailed than the fifth. In this interpretation, Allah becomes what the person listens to or hears, sees, and so forth. In other words, the person only listens to what pleases that person is only to listens to the remembrance of Allah and dhikr and Quran and what have you, and they don't like. Meaning that it's just completely a turn off. Anything else besides this, it's just does not tempt them at all, as we said before. So again, Imam Shawkani does not feel very comfortable with his interpretation. But again, when you read his interpretation at the bottom, I did not see it far away from the other interpretation. He just, now we're going to read his interpretation. You can go up a little bit, inshallah. A seventh interpretation that Ibn Hajar ascribes that Imam Khattabi is that these words refer to how quickly Allah responds. So this interpretation is how quickly Allah responds to that person's dua or actions and what have you. Again, they're all overlapping. Eighth interpretation is given by Imam Muhammad Rashid Rila. According to him, this hadith implies that Allah turns evil away from his wali. He guides his wali to what pleases him. It is by this guidance and blessing that a person now hears. Again, it's overlapping, same thing. And this author's view, Ibn Rajab's explanation, seems to be one of the best according to him. So we go up a little bit. When whenever anyone strives to get close to Allah by performing the obligatory deeds and then the voluntary deeds, he will come closer to him and it will raise him from the degree of faith to the degree of ihsan. You go from iman to ihsan, higher level, and you will begin to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His presence like you are in a presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As you pray, as you fast, as you refrain from the haram, it's like Allah watching you. And watching as if He is seeing him and his heart is filled with recognition of Allah. He loves His grandeur, fear of Him, reverence for Him and His greatness. He will become delighted by His presence and crave turning to Him until his heart is so filled with the clear recognition of Him that it will be as if he is seeing Him with his eyes. Yani this interpretation is just summarizing everything that we talked about. That not only that you feel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is present, but actually you see things with the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to see things. You hear things with the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to hear things. Which makes a lot of sense now. Yani if someone actually sits in a gathering, people talking, and they are interpreting something. So to share with you a story that actually was said about Sayyidina Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, that would just reference this back. So his wife came once to him and told him, I feel very frustrated with the way your friends are treating you. He said, how so? She said, I see it very hypocritical. When, Abdul Rahman always rich and wealthy, but he had his ups and downs. Never been poor, but the downs mean that it's just not much cash flow around him. It's all in the investments and what have you. So he does not have this, lavish cash flow that he would just give everybody that comes and asks him. So the low level of Abdul Rahman when there's just no cash flow, but the billions are still there, but they're invested. They're really invested in assets, but the cash flow is not there. So she says, whenever you have the downfall, which is like lack of cash, they don't show up. They don't know you. They don't come to ask you how you're doing and what have you. But when you have the ups, which is the cash flow, everybody's your friend and they come knock on your door and they want help and they want whatever. That's her frustration, which reflects maybe 95% of who we are, right? We get frustrated. Honestly, by nature, I want to help you out, but I am not demanding, but I expect the same treatment if I fall. But, I get frustrated, but then you say, khalas, I did it for the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then deep inside, you're frustrated. Now, this is how she saw it. Look how Abdul Rahman saw it. And he is to be labeled among the awliya. He said, Wallah, I actually see the total opposite. I really truly love my companions and friends because they are gentle enough not to put me in any kind of hesitant or unwanted or uncomfortable position. They know when I have the cash flow and they would come and ask me, I have it and I'm going to give it to them. So they reach out to me only when they know that I can help them. When they know that I cannot help them, they actually refrain from coming to my doorsteps and asking because they don't want to embarrass me. This is how Abdul Rahman interpreted and how his wife interpreted. So he interpreted in a completely different way, and that's what summarizes for you how a person would become a wali. No matter how negative of things around you, you always see it positive. No matter what happens around you, you always read it in depth because you see it with Allah's guidance. You hear it with Allah's guidance. You touch it with Allah's guidance. You deal with it with Allah's guidance. how how makes a person wali. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the opportunity to be among those. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbi, inshallah. So inshallah we'll stop here for a quick break and then enter the next hadith.
I have a question.
Yes. So we're taking a break. We can take a break and I can take questions at the same time, inshallah.
The word awliya, leaving out English, within Arabic, can it be interpreted in different ways within Quran when it's used in different places?
No, not that I can think of. It's always that high level, absolute deep level of companionship.
So no matter how many times and wherever it appears in the Quran, it still means the same.
The same thing.
Can I ask a totally unrelated question?
Sure.
Now that Ramadan is coming, inshallah, those who have to pay fidya because they can't fast, does that fidya need to be during Ramadan? What is the time limit of the fidya? Does it happen before we begin the month of Ramadan? Is it after or is it during?
So two scenarios that would allow someone to pay fidya. Scenario number one, that someone is temporarily unable to fast. So what they do, they actually break those days and they don't pay fidya, but rather make up those days later on. If they know that they might not be able to make it up for some reason or another, like a nursing mother and what have you, she has no idea when she's gonna stop, breastfeeding and what have you, and whatever. So what she does, she just being on the cautious side, she goes and pays fidya. That's one category, and then she makes it up later on. Second category, those who have chronic illnesses, they know for sure that they can't fast, so they know for sure that the 30 days of Ramadan they cannot fast. Those two categories would pay the fidya, and the fidya is half of the zakat al-fitr. So if it's 12, it's $6. If it's 14, it's 7.5, or 6.5. So if the timing of the fidya is that you either feed a poor person every day, or you can collectively do this at the beginning of Ramadan, mid of Ramadan, or toward the end of Ramadan. Can it be possible after Ramadan? Yes, but then it's the most preferable one is to feed a fasting person. But it's definitely doable to do it even after Ramadan. So you either do it individually every day or collectively that person would invite 30 people, and that would be sufficient enough.
And those people have to be masakin?
Yes.
Okay, so by definition, like let's say if you donated to an orphanage during Ramadan, and does that fidya have to be to Muslims or could it be to non-Muslims as well?
So that's a good question. Everything that has to do with our religious, which means religious actions, that is zakah, fidya, kafara, all these terminologies are strictly for Muslims. Sadaqah can be for Muslims and non-Muslims, which is
Just
general. Yeah, general donation, you can definitely give it to anybody. But all the worship acts of zakah, fidya, kafara, all that has to be for Muslims, and specifically for poor people, masakin or poor, and also that it should be in a form of feeding them. Yani, in another word, you are inviting them to eat food just to make sure that you cover that obligation of feeding. So we're not really privileged to go buy them a car or something or what have you.
So this year, what is the amount, what would be half of the zakat?
So we decided locally with all the local Imam Council, zakat al-fitr would be $13, and fidya would be 7. Inshallah. Well, yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's like local, like people that you know locally, or people that you don't know?
It's preference always to give it to local needy people. If you can't find local needy people, then you can transfer it outside. Well, yeah. Yes.
When you keep reading it again and again, you get a feeling, is it possible that you can feel the presence of Allah within yourself?
Not in a physical way. And that's by far, every scholar is to make sure that we don't get deep into this hadith that we would feel that in order for you to become a wali, then Allah would physically become part of you. Because that's actually one of the kufr concept that we push against that. Because part of our love and deep love and respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we do not allow any physical contact would happen between Allah the Creator and His creations. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never infiltrate in something physical. So when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere, what do we actually mean?
His knowledge.
Yes, His knowledge, His hearing, His seeing, His presence of knowledge and what have you. But in no way we conclude from that Allah is physically present with us here. So even though we know that with His hearing, with His whatever, so we do not bring the physical essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and entity within any of His creations at all.
Yes, we often hear and sometimes we see actions where even ourselves, let's go and ask such and such to pray because he's closer to Allah. Is there any basis for that?
Yeah, this is something like you asked him to make dua, right? Right. So that's something that has been practiced. A lot of Sahaba came to Prophet ﷺ and asked him to make dua for them. Scholars did not argue that just because it was Prophet ﷺ. Of course, that's like high level. But then that tradition kept going on of asking somebody that you would think. That doesn't mean that the person himself would not ask. So they would ask, but then they ask also like more righteous people to make dua for them on some certain, but it would not stop the person himself from making dua. That's completely different than the concept of going to people that have passed away, to their grave sites, and ask dead people, okay, would you, because they consider them to be awliya, please ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because your soul now in the highest level of Jannah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for me to be able to have children or to be wealthy enough that I would do it. No, that we don't do. And we are actually very strongly against that because we have to differentiate between a live person and a dead person. A dead person, that's it. There is no connection between us and them. Alhamdulillah, they went to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they faced their destiny, inshallah, with the good deeds that they have done, but we cannot go and ask them because we believe that there is no connections between us alive and them being dead.
Sorry, are you referring to like the people who go visit Maqam,
Yes.
Hassan al-Hussein
Yes.
and make that?
Yes. Because that's very important, as we said with the obligatory, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of all the 5 pillars that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold us accountable for, what is the most essential, most important thing that you want to make sure that you do not compromise? La, above the salah. Yes, tawheed. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. Allah says clearly in countless amount of hadith, I would forgive everything. Wallahi, if you would come to me on the day of judgment with mountains of bad deeds, lack of salah, not sufficient, not good enough, whatever, I will work with you except on one thing, when you bring partners with me, when you associate somebody else with me, in any kind of format, not even come in close. That includes you leaving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and going to a gravesite and saying, because he was righteous person, I want to ask him to ask Allah. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you ask me directly. Why are you going to somebody who's righteous? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to connect with him, to wake up in the middle of the night and connect and make that prayers with him, to ask him in your sujood, and not to be dependent on others, just because another person is righteous. No. Even if you are the top sinner, everybody agrees that if you have the most sinner person ever and would repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would Allah accept his repentance or not? Yes. Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anywhere says in the Quran and in the Sunnah, if you are a top sinner, and you want to come back and you want to repent, go to the Imam first. Let him cleanse you first. Confess first. See if the Imam thinks that you are doomed or you are okay, I can push you on. None of this. So why do I want to even make it worse if I'm not even allowed to do this with a live person who I think he's the top priest or the top Imam and he's the wali, and I'm not even allowed to do that. Let alone for me to go to a dead person and ask him or ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save me, to do this, to bring me this. And unfortunately, a lot of ignorant people, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten their hearts. But this is all business. Honestly, it's all business. People are making tons and tons of money out of it. Oh, if you enter this shrine, you are to pay $100, but khalas, you are done. Just by you physically entering heaven, you're going to get Firdaus al-A'la. And when you walk out, you are just protected by Allah just because you were blessed to reach to the site of Imam such and such and Imam such and such. And here you go. Not only that you paid a fee of $100 to enter, but you ended up putting another $100 donation because you're so emotionally high. And it's like billions of dollars. It's an industry. Just till that industry stop paying money for it and just allow people to visit without any kind of donation, the whole thing would stop. Because that doesn't make the money that they are looking for. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us, inshallah. Ya Rabbi. Yes.
If one fails to do something of those obligatory, non-obligatory things, is it a good thing to feel bad about it, feel miserable, punish yourself, or let it go and go for it?
If they do what?
Suppose we are not able to completely do.
Oh, if they're not able to reach to that level.
That level.
So that's
self-embarrassed, you keep feeling miserable.
No, you should not feel miserable, but rather you feel actually to the urge of doing better.
That's right.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want you to feel miserable at all, but wants you just to push yourself more and more and more. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this hadith Qudsi that this is high level. But that doesn't mean that if you don't get to it, that you're not good at all. It's just saying that's a high level, and it really takes a person to actually really kind of put the dunya on the side. So by all means, honestly, it means for us, I'm not going to be able to enjoy many of the things that in a halal way, permissible way I enjoy. Because again, you become so into the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that everything else is just a turn off. I don't want to go anywhere except my own room to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the masjid. I want to go Umrah. I want to go Hajj. I don't want to visit such and such because they talk and they gossip and whatever. I don't want to go to the wedding and because a lot of scenes, I don't want to see this. I don't want to go to the mall because I'm going to overhear music. I don't want to go this, I don't want to go. Yes, in another word, with this kind of lifestyle that we have, it's more of a total isolation. Would that person be able to connect with people? Yeah, but only on that level and the places that that person goes to. Besides that, there is no other connection and what have you. It's not something that is easy, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses some people to be able to get to that level. And again, it becomes natural in their life. This is what they enjoy. They don't enjoy, you actually tell them, aren't you, just do some fun time in your life.
Exuberance.
They just don't want it. I don't feel like I want to do anything fun. I just want to do, this is what comforts me, this is what really pleases me. But again, alhamdulillah, that's just to push ourselves more and more. Okay, Kashi. Bring on the next hadith, inshallah.
So you're saying basically that we're striving to be this, not necessarily that we're going to be able to reach this state, but that we're trying to head in that direction.
Sah. And I want you to know from the previous hadith that we learned, even if you don't get to that level, would you still get some reward or not?
Yes.
Absolutely, by the intention. Remember last week what we said? And that's what so many the hadith that we covered last week, It talks heavily about the intention, and you truly intend to. And every time you say, Ya Allah, help me more, Ya Rab, I'm trying, wallahi, but it's just I feel weak sometimes. So that by itself is a great thing, alhamdulillah. So this hadith is short, mashallah. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكرهوا عليه. So here the hadith is very short. Prophet ﷺ says, إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي الخطأ. So on the authority of Ibn Abbas, he said, the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, on my behalf, because of the love that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why we call him the Shafi'a. He's the who's going to intercede for us on the day of judgment. He's the Shafi'a. Right? He's going to intercede, he's going to give us that Shafa'ah. On my behalf, I should push it up a little bit so everybody sees it. On my behalf, Allah has pardoned for my nation what is done mistakenly, out of forgetfulness or under, what is it?
Duress.
Duress. And under duress, which is right here, وَمَا اسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ. This is a Hasan hadith, meaning that it is an accepted hadith that is pushed among the accepted Sahih hadith. So now we'll see إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكره عليه. So al-khata is known. We know this very well. And when we forget things, that's known. But here maybe what is to focus on, what is tukrihu alayhi? What does it really mean? So let's go inshallah to that because of the time. Because everybody was really brought up from earlyhood that if we forget things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't hold us accountable for it. If we forget it, if we do not know it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't hold us accountable for it. So al-khata' mistake that maybe we didn't know, or out of weakness or whatever, and nisyan and istikrah. So let's go down to the istikrah, which is what we were forced to do that we didn't really love more, a little bit more. Let's see what it says. So this is all the introduction. I think that's all okay because this is about the nisyan. Okay. So this is no, I think that's not okay. Good. So that figure is that's all about the hadith about the nisyan and khata and what have you. More. This is more of the introduction of every hadith. See, this is all about this. إن الله تجاوز عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكرهوا عليه. Same thing. Now we want to. I'm sorry, just go back a little bit here. A little bit more. Important general observations after the above lengthy discussion to determine both the authenticity, because this is all the level of what Hasan, the difference between hadith Hasan and hadith Sahih. Hasan is not on the level of Sahih. So if it stands, this is just a very summary about the ruling of hadith. If a hadith stands by itself as Hasan, it will not be taken. It will just drop to become weak. But what makes it stand is that you would have another narration that would support it, another similar narration that would support it, another close enough narration that would support it. It would push it barely enough to stand. If it's pushed barely enough to stand, then they call it Hasan. And we actually act upon it religiously. So that just gives you a summary of what has been said about the hadith, Marwan and Hassan and all that. So let's go down, shall we? Now this is more a hadith where we understand إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي ما وسوست به صدورها ما لم تعمل أو This hadith reflects exactly hadith number 36 that we covered last week. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let go and will not hold the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam accountable for the thoughts that come to their minds and sometimes stays in their chests. You know, all the whys that we talked about last week. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does things? Why heaven? Why hellfire? Why punishment? Why is it that, you know, all these whys, sometimes they're only whispering and then you get rid of it. And sometimes you can't get rid of it, so it kind of sinks in a little bit in the chest, but you don't share it with anybody. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as long as that person does not act upon it, and that's the most dangerous part. أو تكلم. You know, I don't know if I shared with you last week or not. I have one, unfortunately, of the youth that have decided to get out of the folds of Islam, and he wrote a 45-page of reasoning why he absolutely believes that there is no such thing as a religious thing. There is no existence of God. There is nothing. طبعا he does not, he's not really strong on not recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he definitely strong on saying that whatever in our hands now, whether it's the Quran, it's the Hadith, Sahaba stories, none of it. This is all fake. He does not get to the level where he can deny Allah. He says, I think that's naturally a person is born to connect with Allah. So the way you just leave people the way it is, people will connect with Allah. All this would not really follow through of these commands and halal and haram that would mess up people, and it's nothing but just agenda that others are gaining power with it, fame with it, money with it, positions with it, becoming someone of debateables, whatever, you know. But the reason why I share with you this story, subhanAllah, despite all the mess that got into his head, from waswasa, still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be fine with it. From residing within his chest and it's bothering him and he's not reaching out to knowledgeable people in order to clarify that. Because I kept telling him throughout the 2 years of research, as you are saying, what sources are you researching? And of course, everything he's doing by himself from the internet. I said, who did you reach out to only to clarify your whatever summary of what you understood from online? And the unfortunate fact, he did not reach out to any of the scholars. So he reads on his own. Of course, he reads opinions of scholars and saying all the contradiction that he considers, and he feels there's more contradiction and more and more and more and more. But he did not allow himself to sit with people who are more knowledgeable with him to clarify. But he does say that whoever in gathering talk to, whether people who are knowledgeable enough, not scholars, but knowledgeable enough or non-knowledgeable. Non-knowledgeable will not argue with them, they say we don't know any better. Knowledgeable people would tell him that it's haram for him to discuss even these things. And they should just accept Allah's will, because that's none of his business to get into Allah's domain and what have you. So he's always shut off. But the reason why I'm talking about this. At the beginning, before he published the 45-page that he concluded that this is all nonsense, he used to say, I don't want to discuss it with others, meaning that I don't want to talk about it. Because that's himself, because I don't want to mess up the minds of others. Because at the end I might be totally wrong, and I don't want to ruin people's life and make them second guess Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this deen. That's how it started. After he became very well established in his mind, he started publicly speaking in every gathering about his disconnection with this deen. So that's what will not allow him to be excused all this. But this, when you start actually going out and messing up people's minds, this is where you become an advocate of shaitan. So that's something very important for you to note today, that this is the most dangerous one. When you keep saying, you know, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to mess up the people's mind, and you end up opening up the 45 pages. And this and this and this and this and this, and you end up messing people's minds. Okay, let's just keep going. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand from this hadith, that وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Yet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not placed upon you in the religion any hardship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never ask us, yes, difficult, challenging positions, yes. Difficult positions, yes. Hardship, yes. Something that looks to us a little bit beyond our ability, yes. But in general, it will never come to a point where it's impossible for us to do or act upon or to observe or to take. Because that would go against the fairness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to overwhelm us with something that we can't do. We cannot. We basically just impossible for us to do. So that's something that you want. Yes, we are being tested. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, with all this hard test, I excuse you and exempt you from things that you don't know. Somebody that has not been paying zakah for many years, now he repents and starts paying zakah and pays from the previous ones. They haven't been fasting, they start fasting. They start making salah, they go to hajj and what have you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala excuses those who didn't know before, and excuses those who are, in complete forgetfulness. Somebody completely forgot to do something that is obligatory. You forgot to pray Fajr today, completely forgot, or Dhuhr, or what have you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold that accountable for you. You can just make it up and khalas, keep going and what have you. And things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to know, that I will not put you in that position. Yes. So Allah has pardoned those categories. But the thing is, وَمَسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ, things that gets you against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you are not in that position. As we spoke before, like some of the Sahaba that were forced to actually denounce Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. Now, to conclude, this is very straightforward hadith that alhamdulillah most of you are familiar with. What I just want to conclude with, things that are related to our lifestyle. Would our weak position as Muslims, sometimes that we feel insecure of ourselves, not because we don't love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough, not because we don't love Prophet Muhammad enough, not because of anything else, except because of the pressure that is being pushed upon us. The media, the peer pressure, the ultimate lifestyle around the globe that pushes for disconnection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Would all this actually give us excuse enough to be pardoned when we feel a little bit secured of ourselves? When we actually, whether we admit it or not, we actually sometimes hide our identity. We are not really so vocal about it because of the situation around us. Would that fall into that we are being forced not to show absolute connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No. No, you think no. How so?
It is, we live way we live in, and the pressures are there, and we think we may be in a very dire situation, but historically, other people have been in reverse dire situations, so it's a comparative growth, and at a minimum, it is required for us to at least do something internally about it and recognize that what's happening is wrong, and then try to say something about it, or then physically do something about it. But just because we are in this situation does not excuse us from, at our individual level at a minimum, and then as a community to try to do something.
Okay. Yes, other thoughts?
I disagree.
Okay.
With respect to Brother Abraham, I think that Allah knows what we are capable of doing and not doing, and He judges us by our intention, and He knows our ability. Some people are stronger to stand up to injustice. Some people are not. That's why in the Hadith it says, when you see something wrong, vocally, speak up, stand up against it. The least of which is hated in your heart. There are different degrees, and not everybody's at the degree to change it, for example, with their hands. So if we're living in a non-Muslim country, I think the pressures are the same in quote-unquote Muslim countries, because practicing the deen, people are taking it to one extreme and saying this is the deen, when in fact this is a very skewed version of the deen, if you want to put it that way. And the people who are not practicing at all and going in the direction of atheism or non-association with the deen because of the extreme push from the extremists. And then there are very few who are in the middle who are trying their best to practice the deen correct as it was intended. So I think, getting caught in the middle of all that, it doesn't matter where you live anymore, it's the same thing. That's my
Sure. So we got two interesting observation. Any other thoughts? Not that we're making excuses for ourselves. We're just being very truthful, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually sharing that with us. Is it something that actually pardons us? When we say pardons us, it does not mean that it completely excuses us. But would it pardon us that we get weaker and weaker? This is something that's very interesting, and I really, on a personal level, tend to agree with Sister Saha. I really believe if you would have two scenarios, living in a righteous environment, and I have the ability to deal in a halal way with all halal transaction and dealing, but I make way more money if I deal with riba. If I choose the route of riba, it's not like if I get weaker nowadays with this kind of era, that I access right as riba, straight riba, left riba, behind riba, so-called Islamic transaction, hidden riba, rent, hidden riba. There is no difference between honestly mortgage or mortgage riba, rent. They are including the riba in it. You think that you're not paying the mortgage, you are paying the landlord what he pays the banks, directly or indirectly. But we are saying, what choices do I have? So when I get weaker, it doesn't excuses me, but actually there is a difference. There is a huge difference between me here having actually a clear direction that I can go purely halal, but I choose not to because I make more money there. Where here I'm not purely going halal, but it's beyond my ability. What can I do? It's being pushed on me. Same thing would goes for a sister that lives in a pure Islamic society, where she goes comfortably out with her hijab, full hijab. No one bothers her. Actually, everybody respects her. Everybody gives her all the kind of encouragement. No one is staring in her face. No one is giving any kind of body language that would show any kind of resentment or what have you. But she chooses, no, I want to look good. I don't want to put on hijab. Is it really the same as an environment where everybody around the globe is pushing for that, out of the box, progress Islam? You can have it all. You can become an extreme. You can become a model. while you are wearing hijab. How? But again, we're being very weak, pushed on us that in general we don't like to be different. We don't like to be looked at differently and whatever. So the pressure is strong enough for that sister not to actually put on hijab the way that she feels that she would need to. Is it really the same? I don't think they're the same. I think that the pressure is giving us some type of pardon that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would really on the day of judgment judge us on the time era that we have lived in. So living during the time of Sahaba, by all means, Allah expects high standards. Because around you is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, around you are all the Sahabas. For someone to go wrong, it's really, really, really not acceptable. But during a tough time, a very challenging time where every directions I'm trying to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the pressure around me is not allowing me. It does not excuse me, but do I get some type of pardon and will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really judge us differently because of the time and because of the era that we lived in? I do really believe that this is the case where we are being pushed directly or indirectly, not to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way that He wants us to worship Him. We're not being allowed to do so. We're not giving that absolute comfort zone to do so. We're not being surrounded by people that are actually doing it and I just don't feel like I want to be part of them. But rather everybody else wants to go and live large and here I feel all on by myself. So yes, it's not too easy and it's not really something that I would say would excuse us, but it does give us some type of pardon that I want to do more, I want to go higher, but really things around me are not helping more. It's more of pressure than pushing me a little bit down. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, of course. That does not mean that we just excuse ourselves to do less, but rather actually to always strive harder to say that, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pardon me, I just want to do more and more and more, inshallah, as we get to a level where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would change surrounding around us that would actually allow us to be pushed up to the level of awliya, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu fikum. May Allah reward you for your patience and staying a little bit late, inshallah ta'ala. I think next week, Imam Abu Talib will give you the final one and you will finish, inshallah ta'ala, the curriculum on this series of the 40 Hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. Jazakumullah.